Dragon is the genre-defining great-grandfather of all beat-em-ups, I was actually tempted to leave it off this list, because the game has aged horribly and is just viciously, unplayably terrible. Double Dragon tells the tale of Billy Lee, a man whose scantily clad girlfriend Marion is brutally punched and then slowly kidnapped by the Shadow Warriors, a gang of thugs. Billy is actually only a few steps away while these events gradually take place, but our hero is apparently more concerned with finding a cowboy vest that matches his hot pants and metal shoes than he is with the commotion going on outside. By the time Billy finally leaves his garage, Marion is gone, and he has no choice but to fight the Shadow Warriors to win her back. You know, I give this game credit where credit is due. Double Dragon was revolutionary for its time. There were primitive fighting games before this one, like Irm's Kung Fu Master, but it was Double Dragon that defined the classic beat-em-up with movements in 4 directions, usable items and weapons, a full moveset including jumping attacks and throws, and 2-player simultaneous co-op. This was cutting-edge stuff for 1987, so it is hardly unexpected that such a groundbreaking game would be so unrefined. And oh my god, is it unrefined. Billy Lee doesn't walk so much as he lurches wildly back and forth across the screen at random speeds, seemingly as unbound by the laws of physics as he is by the laws of fashion. Maybe coordination is too much to ask from a 200-pound man inexplicably stuffed into a pair of solid silver boots and his sister's yoga pants, but the experience is frustrating all the same. Plus, your enemies look just as unfortunate as you do, and they have no problem making a beeline directly for you and beating you to an oddly dressed pulp. And that leads me to the biggest problem with Double Dragon, the actual combat. See, the thing about Billy Lee is that he punches slowly and clumsily, and there's a significant cooldown animation every 2 or 3 strikes. This means that even if you line up your attacks correctly, you still get hit or trade hits a lot. And the thing about that is there is no stun effect from your punches until you land several in a row. So they don't combo. Well, they do for your enemies, but not for you. So your primary attack is basically useless. And so are your jump kicks, which can be arbitrarily ducked by the CPU whenever it decides to, which is usually. So that leaves you with the back elbow. This move is as overpowered as every other is underpowered. It is unblockable, undodgeable, and unstoppable. My personal theory is that it was added at the last second by panicked developers who suddenly realized that many players were all too familiar with having the dexterity of a tumbleweed and the fighting prowess of Rosie O'Donnell after series of strokes, and probably played video games to escape that feeling, not be cruelly reminded of it. Either way, you spend the entire game running away from your opponents and trying to avoid being surrounded. Once they come in close enough, you simply elbow them in the face and they sort of pitch over onto the ground like a sack of garbage. This works on every opponent in the game, from the first guy you face to the other guy you face. Double Dragon was the first real beat-em-up, but Capcom's Final Fight was the first good one. Released in 1989 on Capcom's powerful new 16-bit CPS-1 hardware, it's almost unbelievable that this game came out only 2 years after Double Dragon. Not only does Final Fight look and sound awesome, but the developers took everything that was broken about Double Dragon's gameplay and made it functional and entertaining, if a little bit cheap. And when I say took everything from Double Dragon, I really mean everything. Final Fight tells yet another story of an innocent young girl who is kidnapped by a vicious yet ethnically inclusive street gang. But wait, there's more. This time, there is a layer of political intrigue that is the most stupid and best thing ever. You see, my friends, in Final Fight, the kidnapped girl is the mayor's daughter, and you play as the mayor himself, Mike Hager. And what a mayor he is. Mike Hager looks like Burt Reynolds' head on Brock Lesnar's body, raised in a Siberian prison on a steady diet of animal steroids and violent pornography. He hates shirts even more than he hates crime, and the intro describes him as a former street fighter, which is like describing the sky as formerly blue. Hager instantly responds to the Mad Gear Gang's attack like he was just waiting for an excuse, charging shirtlessly into the ghetto and beating everyone to death with his bare fists, pausing only to dumpster dive for unwrapped meat and samurai swords. He goes on to repeat this process throughout every neighborhood in the city, proving both that Mayor Haggard is refreshingly free of socioeconomic bias and that his bloodlust is absolutely insatiable. In addition to being totally insane, Final Fight is a really good game. Beat-em-ups work when the action is fast and precise, and Capcom's CPS-1 board was up to the challenge. The controls in Final Fight are super responsive, and the engine sets up rules that make sense and reward skill. If you hit or grab an enemy before he hits you, you combo 100% of the time. And a skillful player can learn to keep the mad gears at bay by cutting angles, using jump kicks and weapons to control the distance, and best of all, throwing one enemy into a pack of others, which scatters them like bowling pins. Final Fight looks great too. The backgrounds are super detailed, the animation is incredibly fluid, and the art style is colorful yet strikingly dark and grimy. Still, there are a few flaws. Arcade games are sadistic by design. They have to be in order to keep the quarters coming in, and Final Fight is no exception. This is not a fatal flaw since a skillful player can learn to beat the whole game without dying, but I would legitimately call it a repetition. Final Fight isn't hard because the mechanics are extremely deep or subtle. It's hard because the margin for error is very small, and the mad gears are overly aggressive and there are tons of them. On the other hand, the two-player co-op makes things a lot more manageable, and there are thankfully quite a few fully cooked steak dinners for the mayor to pull out of a trash can and eat in one bite. The other lame thing about Final Fight was that the only way to legally play it for the longest time was to track down one of the decidedly half-assed ports that came out for SNES or Sega CD. That is no longer the case since Capcom released a great version of the game called Final Fight Double Impact on Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network a couple years ago, and I think it's only $5 or $10. How great is that? Streets of Rage was Sega's answer to the SNES exclusive Final Fight, and it was terrible. Beat-em-ups were hot though, so over 1 million players experienced its chunky meatloaf colored graphics and controlled combat that felt more like a synchronized diabetic seizure than an action-packed fight to the death. So when the sequel was announced in 1992, I can only assume that gamers found the idea as appealing as getting to third base with Newt Gingrich. And then Streets of Rage 2 came out, and somehow it was amazing. I'm not going to say too much about Streets of Rage 2's story because honestly it is neither good enough to mention nor bad enough to be funny. There is a crime boss named Mr. X who naturally has kidnapped your best friend for some reason and you fight his minions on the streets of Rage. That's all there is and all there needs to be. Streets of Rage 2 takes the refined gameplay of Final Fight and adds a diverse selection of characters who all feel significantly different and cater to different styles of play. From the elusive hit-and-run style of Skate to the bone-crushing power of Max. It also provided a fair challenge that kicked your ass a little bit during later levels, but never approached the outright hostility of Final Fight's difficulty. Now here's where I would usually talk about the flaws, but in my opinion, Streets of Rage 2 is almost perfect within the limited scope of what it's trying to achieve. The gameplay is as smooth as butter. It's an effective sequel that improves on the worthless original in every way. And it looks and sounds great considering the limited hardware it runs on. Streets of Rage 2 is the best beat-em-up on the Genesis, and one of the best for any system.